My name is Mark Rumpler. I'm a scientist, although my training's been in specific areas, but it's generally easier when I mention that I'm a scientist because not too many people know what a toxicologist is or does. But my training is in toxicology and molecular diagnostics. I'm a laboratory director for a public health laboratory, and we are the testing arm for the public and the citizens of the jurisdiction that we're in. So we provide testing that ensures things like clean water, clean air and soil, and we keep track of the general contaminants in the environment. We also do things like diagnostic and health testing. So we look at foodborne outbreaks. We look at things like antibiotic resistance. We also are primarily involved in the pandemic with doing COVID-19 testing. A large part of our staff is now pivoted to doing that. So in general, a public health laboratory is charged with being the testing arm for a certain space and for the citizens of that jurisdiction. Well, I kind of I came into toxicology in a way through a pharmacy. I originally started out because there was a career path presentation at my school when I was a junior, and a pharmacist came in, and what he discussed sounded very good to me. So I actually applied to college for pharmacy, and I spent the first year taking many courses that were pharmacy related and geared towards that profession. It was shortly after that that I realized I didn't want to do pharmacy. And so, you know, I talked with some individuals in that program and looked for guidance at the university that I was at. And I found my way into a toxicology program. And toxicology is really simply, it's the study of poisons, but it's a really broad definition, and it can go anywhere from looking at environmental contaminants to looking at drugs in the public or for death investigations. So toxicology is a broad area, but that's what I did my undergraduate degree in. After that, I spent a few years in the private industry doing laboratory testing. And I realized that I wanted to make bigger decisions rather than just being a bench level chemist, is what they call it when you get right out of high school and go into a laboratory. So for me, I always wanted to be a manager. And so that's when I went back to graduate school and worked on my master's degree. But that wasn't enough punishment, so I went back for my doctorate degree as well. All told, it was 11 to 12 years of school. And after that, when you get done, then you do what's called a postdoctoral education, which is an additional 2 years. So that's not so much schooling and education as it is real world practice. So that's where I really settled in. Because I was never a school-oriented person. I was never good at test taking. I was never good at coursework. I always wanted to get into the real world to do actual practice. So I love my job. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I'm really glad where I ended up. I love the laboratory space. I love being a scientist. And so when I get in for the morning, I usually get right to work. I make a to-do list almost every day, and sometimes twice a day. And that's just to keep track of everything that comes my way. I want to be involved in discussions. I communicate with a lot of people every day. That's usually my peers and my staff. I like to know what they're doing. I like them to know what I'm doing in terms of looking out for them or seeking new opportunities. So there's a lot of communication, and we generally do that by meetings. There is a lot of meetings, but I use those as opportunities to talk to people, to learn about my staff, and to understand what's happening around in our building, in our department. There's usually a lot of emails as well. And that, again, that's more communication with people who aren't so close to you. But I do meetings, I do emails, and then there's a good bit of planning. And by planning, I mean, I'm usually reading, or I'm usually on webinars or virtual presentations. And that's to understand what our opportunities here at the laboratory can be for the future. And so a lot of my job is to prepare for the future and what's coming, and maybe new tests that we could offer, or what's the current situation with COVID-19, or how can we adapt to that? What can we do to make a difference and make an impact in the public lab space? And that's pretty much the rest of my day. Other than that, it's time to go home and make a new to-do list. Well, I think the public in general, and probably students as well, do not hear about the laboratory at all, especially when we talk about things like the pandemic. The laboratory is a behind-the-scenes workforce, and they take great pride in being that. They operate with little fanfare, but they do a lot of work. Collectively, there is a lot of work all across the world that laboratorians do that never gets published, never gets heard about, never makes it to the media. We're involved in chemical terrorism attacks, and you wouldn't know that. We test unknown substances. We're involved in bioterrorism attacks by testing unknown agents that may contribute to a catastrophic event in, say, the state or even the US. And you would never have known that if you drove by our building, that's what we do here. We handle very dangerous substances. We respond to emergency situations. And the entire mission is to protect the people of Tennessee. And if I were to be able to shout something from a soapbox, it would be, take a look at our staff. We do some really wonderful things here, and I'm proud to be part of this team. There's some wonderful opportunities to be a medical technologist, and the world needs them. The US needs them. I know everyone thinks about this. The pay is really good, but that's because the demand is there. And so there are a lot of opportunities to learn in medical technology and being part of a laboratory. But if you do a 4-year program in medical technology, it'll put you in a really good position to obtain your certification right after college, which is generally what you need in this space, is a certification to work in a laboratory in most states. In some states, you also need licensing as well. But those things are often, they often come, and you're well suited to tackle licensing and certification with the 4-year education that you might have. Well, you really have to, be patient, and you have to persevere. And in science, you deal with a lot of brick walls, figuratively speaking. Of course, there are a lot of things that get in your way, and you've got to figure out how you might be able to break those down. And it's a learning process, but you have to exercise patience and perseverance. Those two things go hand in hand in science, in research, and clinical diagnostic testing. Take this pandemic, for example. There are a lot of things that got in our way early on, and whether it was supplies, whether it was the type of test, whether it was the type of collection that we were using. We learned so much, and we broke down so many barriers. We are so far advanced now with COVID-19, making so much progress in the laboratory side of things. You would have never thought we could have gotten here in a year, but it's all about perseverance and about knocking those barriers down and making progress because of that.